Hello, Grantham. Hello, my professor and my fellow classmates. Once again, it's Yamika Harper. Um, Now we're in week 6, and we're talking about informational speech. And I decided to do something toward part of my history, Black history. And I decided to do Harriet Tubman and some information on her and how did she do her work under the Underground Railroad. And I think a lot of people know about that. It helped free slaves back in slavery time. And so I found some facts about her. And to be honest with you, she's an amazing woman. So I'm going to read some things about her and the people she helped and how it went about. So I hope you enjoy this information. All right. Like I said, the most conductor on the Underground Railroad was Harriet Tubman. The Underground Railroad, short term UR, was not an underground nor was it a railroad. It was called underground because it was a circular nature and railroad because it was an emergent form of transportation. So basically what they're saying is that it wasn't underground, it definitely was a railroad, but they called it underground because it was a way for people to get around. The UR was an informal network that had many routes. Most routes went northern states and after 1850 to Canada. Others went south to Mexico or the Caribbean. Wow. Historians estimated that about 100,000 slaves escaped using this UR network. 100,000. Wow. Most action by people who helped slaves escape was action of generosity. There were women, there were men, there were children, whites and blacks. Can you believe that back in the day they worked together like that? A lot of them were Quakers and Mormons. Railroad language was adopted, a secret code used by agents, station masters, conductors, operators, stockholders, and all those involved in saving lives, which were slaves. Code songs were used by slaves. So what they would do, they would come up with a hymn and they knew what this hymn was about. So when they hear somebody singing, they knew it was time to go. Okay. Levi Coffin was known as the president of the Underground Railroad and his home as the grand station of the Underground Railroad. So his home was the main station, the main port where everybody knew to go. This history of the UR goes back to the 1780s and became known as such in the 1830s. It reached the heights in the 1850s and ended in 1863 when President Lincoln announced the Emancipation Proclaim. The most famous supporter of the UR was Harriet Tubman, first of all, because everybody knows who she is, Levi Coffin, Will Steele, Frederick Douglass, Thomas Grant, William Lloyd, Garrison, John Brown, Samuel Green, and Loretta Coffin Moore, and many others. The UR station had secret hideouts and such passenger basement cellars and hidden components and cupboards where slaves were safely hidden. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 made it more difficult for slaves to escape. The law allowed for slaves to be returned to their masters, even though they were in a free state. So even though they made it out of there, there was still a fear of having to go back to the torture and terror. The final destination became Canada. The Underground, under the Fugitive Slave Act, any person who was caught helping a slave escape or offering shelter could be sent to jail for 6 months or subject to pay $1,000 fine. Some more information on Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman's actual birth date is unknown. It is believed that she was born between 1819 and 1823. Her birth name was Amita Ross, but she was nicknamed Minty by her mother. Tubman's maternal grandmother, Modesty, arrived on a slave ship from Africa. This information is also, if this information, they don't have any information on her ancestors. Harriet had 8 siblings. Leela in 1808, Maria 1811, Robert in 1816, Sophia 1813, Ben 1823, Rachel in 1825, Henry in 1830, and Moses in 1832. When Harriet was a teenager, she suffered a head injury. When an overseer threw a heavy metal at her runaway slave, instead hit her in the head. Wow, that's something that to be going through. As a result of the injury, she suffered from sleeping spells. She would suddenly fall asleep, and it was difficult to wake her up. It gave her visions and dreams that she considered signs from God. Religion faith was the reason she risked her life guiding slaves to freedom. I'm sorry about that. In 1835, about 14 years before Harriet escaped, about half of African Americans populations on the eastern shore of Maryland was free. In 1844, she married John Tubman, an African free man. After Harriet escaped, she came back for him, but he had married another woman. Before escaping, she changed her name from Amita to Harriet, and after her mother, and adopted her husband's last name. In 1849, Harriet and her 2 brothers, Harriet and Ben, successfully escaped. Her 2 brothers had second thoughts and returned to the plantation. Harriet decided to continue and successfully made it to Pennsylvania, to a free state. Wow. Harriet was an underground railroad network used by fugitive slaves to escape to the Freedom Territories. They were aiding and abolished of free African Americans who guided them to secret routes and safe houses. All right, let's see. Her first trip to bring her family to freedom was in 1850. She brought her niece Keisha, her husband John Bowley, and their 2 children. In 10 years conducting the Underground Railroad, she had made 19 trips and guided her parents, siblings, relatives, and friends for a total of around 300 slaves. Some were guided by her and others followed her instructions. She usually worked during winter months to avoid being seen, and on Saturday nights because newspapers would publish the runaway notice on Monday morning. Tubman's nickname was Moses, and who gave her this name was William Lloyd Garrison. Tubman carried a handgun for self-protection and urged slaves not to give up. Tubman and other slaves she guided were not captured. None of them. Tubman helped recruit supporters for the John Brown Helper Ferry Brigade. John Brown called her the General Tubman. Tubman was disgusted to avoid getting caught. She dressed as the man. She disguised herself dressed as the man, old woman, or middle-class free African American. In her last trip she brought to Enola family, they had an infant and had to be dragged with periodic order to keep up and keep that child quiet. During the Civil War, she was paid $200 over a period of 3 years. She supported herself selling pies. Now, that I never read in the history books. Tubman claimed that the government owes her $966 for her service as a scout from May the 25th, 1862 to January the 31st, 1865. That is $30 a month for 32.5 months for service. However, scouts and spies were paid $60 a month and an Amish soldier $15 a month. It took her 34 years just to get her veterans pensions. Okay. During the Civil War, she worked as a nurse and a cook. Her knowledge in local plants helped her cure soldiers' destiny. Tubman. I have to end it because I done made my time, but I do hope what y'all did. I hope y'all enjoy what I printed out. Until next time, see you later.